Hello, and welcome to the TDSB Parent and Community Engagement Office series of webinars for school councils. This is the first one, and it's on school council basics. I'm Nancy Angevine Sands. I'm a family consultant, and I work with school councils, PICs, and educators to help build effective homeschool partnerships. We're going to get started. I hope everything works fine. On the side of your screen, hopefully you will see a group chat box. If you have any questions, write them in there. And at the end of the presentation, when you see me again after the PowerPoint presentation, I'll try to go through as many of the questions as we have time for. So give me a minute while I hopefully bring up the PowerPoint, and we'll get started. Okay, these webinars will be available on the PCEO YouTube page. For this reason, and to protect your privacy, visual contributions by viewers will not be possible. However, I already told you about the chat box on the right-hand side, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that that works. If the chat does not work or you have questions afterwards, please do not hesitate to write me. My email you can see in the bottom corner here with equalstep@gmail.com. All of the information, or a majority of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you this evening can be found in the School Council Handbook. You can find that online at edu.gov.on.ca, or just Google School Council Handbook, Ministry of Education. All of the webinars are designed to meet accessibility guidelines. So let's get started. I'm going to be referring to this guy, Mr. Eye on the Ball, throughout this evening and in subsequent webinars. Let's see what I mean by keeping your eye on the ball. School councils, according to Regulation 612, have the purpose of active participation by parents to improve pupil achievement. Everything your council does should answer this directive. Sometimes your work might have a secondary link, such as building relationships, but councils should try to have the majority of their projects aimed directly at achievement. And I'm talking about family engagement and achievement. And so your work as a school council is in building the capacity of your families to support student learning. You'll note that another part of council is to make the system accountable to parents. That means, how do policies and procedures from the board and the ministry affect student learning and family engagement? And how might families affect or influence those documents? I want to pause for a moment and point out that you will hear me refer to family engagement and not parent engagement. This is because now our families are not just mom and dad. They are mom and dad, mom and mom, dad and dad, mom on her own or dad on his own, grandparents, uncles, aunts, guardians. And our work must reflect this reality and be as inclusive as possible. A school council is also an advisory group, according to the regulations. Now, this is important. They may only advise schools and boards on issues. However, the legislation is also clear that principals, boards, and ministry are required to respond to the advice that they're given. So if, as a school council, you give advice to your principal about something, they are required to either say to you, yes, we're going to take your advice, and this is how and when it'll roll out. No, we aren't going to take your advice, and this is why. Or we like your advice, but there's some things that we're struggling with, and we'd like you to help us with it, or we're thinking that we might roll it out that way, in another way. So the role of the school council is one of the roles is to consult with parents of students enrolled in the school about matters under consideration by the council. This is very important. Members should have ongoing communication with a wide sample of the school community to see what families need to support their children's learning. What do they need to build their capacity? And that's the eye on the ball, pupil achievement. How will that consultation influence the council's initiatives going forward? The school councils are also required to develop bylaws. If your council has written bylaws, are they relevant to your current community? Review should happen at least every 3 years. We know how quickly some communities can change. So what your bylaws are set up, do they match the community as it exists now? If the bylaws were written when your council was starting to grow and build, you might have only put in for maybe 8 or 10 members. Maybe your council now is is growing and very active and very healthy. And so you might want to amend your bylaws to allow for more parent members. That's just an example. If your council does not have bylaws, then at your next meeting, I strongly urge you to strike a bylaws committee and have them participate in the bylaws webinar, which comes up next, and I'll talk about that at the end of this one, and begin the process of writing them. Bylaws are vital for a well-functioning council. You wouldn't build a house without a foundation, and you cannot expect a council to withstand the challenges or problems it might face without bylaws. You must keep your minutes and financial records for 4 years for examination by any community member or school community member who wants to see them. I suggest a binder in the office somewhere, but 4 years is the required amount. And you have to produce an annual written report and a PSAB, a financial report that is to be submitted to the board. So write them, give them to your principal, and wait for them and ask the principal to submit it to the board at the end of the year. That can be done in May or June. The mandate, as set out by regulations for school council, is elected. All positions are elected or appointed for 1 year. Elected and appointed members may seek additional terms, and the bylaws should state any limitations on the number of terms served. I think this last point is really important. There are a lot of schools where the school council members serve for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. When this happens, and bless them for giving that much of themselves to their school community, but when it's the same people serving all of the time, you aren't building capacity and you're not encouraging the parents and guardians in your community to consider running. So when you put a limitation on terms, you can say, for example, each member may only serve for 2 terms, then must have a year or 2 off before standing for election again. Let's take a look at the duties as set out by the regulations. The chair. The chair, in conjunction with the principal, for the first 2 points here, arranges the dates of the meetings, and that really should be done with the council as a whole at the beginning of the year. When will we hold our meetings through the year? Will they be the first Monday of every month, or will we set specific dates? How will we do it? But it's the responsibility of the chair to make sure that happens. The chair prepares the agenda, not the principal, the chair. Now, this does not mean that the principal shouldn't have a role. I would hope that every chair would consult with their principal to find out things that were coming up at the school or that had happened at the school that the people who attended the meeting should know about and be able to discuss. The chair also has to consult with any chairs of his or her committees to see if they're ready to report and what they want to say. And of course, to consult with the treasurer about the treasurer's report. The chair leads the council meetings, ensures that the minutes are recorded and maintained, facilitates resolution of conflict. This is perhaps one of the most challenging jobs for chairs, and I hope that few of you face this. As we will see in the webinar that looks at bylaws, in the school council handbook, there are suggestions for conflict resolution. I suggest that you look at those. I suggest that if you have a conflict you must resolve between executive members or members, council members, that you look at the handbook for help, that you go to your principal for assistance, and of course, the Parent and Community Engagement Office is always there to help you. The chair is also ex officio on all committees. This doesn't mean you have to serve on every committee. It just means you can attend if you wish. And it's the chair's responsibility to communicate with the principal on behalf of the council. And sometimes it's the chair's responsibility to make that initial, that push to create a really good working relationship with your principal. Parent reps on the council must participate in or should participate in committees established by the council. They don't have to participate in every committee, but there may be one or two that they're interested in. They, of course, contribute to the discussion and debate at council and vote on issues. The most important, I think, job that they have is to solicit the views of parents and members of the community on how they feel about initiatives that the council might take, is taking, have taken. See what parents need. What do they want? What would be meaningful to them? And then share that information with the council when they're trying to decide what to do. And of course, to observe the council's code of ethics and bylaws. The board of TDSB has a code of ethics that you could use. As well, PIAC on their website has a code of ethics that's been written for councils, and I suggest that you look at those and see if they might work for you. Now, as you can see, the principal has a lot of responsibilities as set out by not only Regulation 612, but Regulation 613. They are to act as a resource and assist the council in obtaining any information it may need, to solicit views of the council on policies, things like code of conduct and the student dress code, on new education initiatives that relate to achievement and accountability, or any education initiative, and school action plans based on EQAO results, and communicate those plans. And I will add here, and I should have added it before, this isn't in the regulations, but in TDSB, they also, and any board in Ontario, they are required to consult with school councils on the school improvement plan. And that means to find a way for councils to have meaningful input, not just look at the plan when it's completed and then say yes or no. Also, PIAC's website has some information on the SIP and how you may, as a council, contribute effectively to that. Principal responsibilities also can are to, as I've said earlier, to consider recommendations and advise the council how they're going to act, and to distribute the report to the board, and to distribute any Ministry of Education materials, to give written notice 14 days prior to the election in September, and to attend every school council meeting or send a representative. Contrary to some belief that's out there, if the principal or the representative cannot be at a school council meeting, it is not a legally constituted meeting. Meetings. The regulations say that school council must meet at least 4 times a year. I personally don't think you can accomplish much meeting only 4 times a year. I would suggest at least 6 meetings a year. Many school councils don't meet in December. It's already a busy enough year. They don't meet in March because of March break. And some councils end in May, allowing June to be the wrap-up month all around. School council has to start within 30 days of the start of school. Usually the first council meeting is the election. The majority of members in attendance, the majority of members must be in attendance, and the majority of those present must be parents. Council's meetings may take place at the school. Make sure it's in an accessible location, not on the second floor, for example. They may also occur outside of the school. For example, if you're trying to get more parents to attend and a large portion of your population is in an apartment complex, you might look into having a meeting in the meeting room. Just make sure that it is accessible and that the parents you are hoping will attend will feel comfortable going. We can't have meetings places where our parents don't feel comfortable and safe. And the principal is responsible for giving notice of meetings. All right, now we're going to move on to elections. How, who, when, where. If you don't have pencil and paper, I suggest you get one now. Although this webinar will be posted on the PCO page of the TDSB website, and you can watch it again. So, how do we do elections? I strongly suggest that school councils form an election committee sometime April or May of the previous year. That committee would include the principal, because the regulations give the principal certain responsibilities for the election, and representatives from parents, teaching, support staff. No one can sit on the election committee that is planning to run for election. All right. So only people who are not wishing to serve on council may be on the election committee. Their roles could include providing nomination forms, requesting profiles of candidates and making them available if desired. Some schools do this, especially schools that end up having elections because they have they have an excess number of people looking for a position, but it's not necessary to provide a profile. And please be aware that providing the profile could make some of your parents less keen to run. That may not be their experience in the area where they went to school to do things like that. It might make them nervous. So just be aware of that. The committee would conduct the election by secret ballot if you have to have a ballot, or by acclamation if you don't have a full complement. They count the ballots. The principal is required to count the ballots and to notify the candidates of the results, but it's a nice idea to have at least one parent there as a backup to watch the count. When you notify the candidates of who won, don't do it in order of how many votes they got, and that information should actually be kept to the committee. This isn't it's not we're not looking at who's the most popular here. So try to keep all the results and information confidential. The principal's role, as I said, is to publicize the election day proceedings at least 14 days prior to the election. That must go out clearly, either on a bulletin board at the school, in a newsletter that the school sends out, or other hard copy, or posted on your webpage, or via Twitter, Facebook, whatever media you have and use. The principal must also make information about the candidates available to the community at least 1 week prior to the election. So these are the candidates we have up to this time. Some schools, and you have to state this in your bylaws, will allow nominations from the floor on the day of the election. Other schools do a cutoff, say a week before. All nominations must be in a week before. You only want to do that if you're sure that you're going to get enough people running for office. If you are having an election, the principal conducts a lottery for ballot positions of candidates, or you could say you're doing it alphabetically. A lottery is a bit better since it becomes random, and no one can complain that, well, my name was at the top, so his name was at the top, that's why he got the most votes. They supervise the election day proceedings. They count the ballots in the presence of at least 2 parents. Voting has to be secret ballot if it is a vote. Council membership. So, most of you are aware of the makeup of school councils. All of these positions must be elected or acclaimed if you don't have enough candidates. This includes the teacher and staff rep. The community representative is appointed by the council following election. And if you're one of the rare schools that continues to have a home in school, the home in school has to select a representative to sit there. Let me add now that the teacher and staff rep have a vote on all council motions. Remember, you are a school council, not a parent council. And that is why we have representatives from all groups: family, teachers, staff, community, and in some cases, students. And they're all working together in partnership for pupil achievement. There's that eye on the ball. Only the principal does not get a vote, and that's because the principal is going to receive advice from the council and cannot vote on the advice that he or she is receiving. As I've said, the majority of members must be parents, and that's why I suggest you start with at least 10 parents or guardians, even if you're just building your council and you struggle to get 3 parents out. In your bylaws, you should state at least 10, because you're going to have at least 5 parents at a meeting to make it a legally constituted meeting. And with 5 extra, it gives you a fighting chance of getting quorum. I want to take a moment here to clear up some misunderstandings in schools. A lot of schools say that if you are a parent, you are a member of council. That's contrary to the regulations. The way that council are selected, as I said, you state how many members you have, let's say beginning with 10. All of the parents in the school may stand for election to council and get a vote on the people who are standing for election. As well, there's no restriction on which parents may run. So if you have all you have to do is have a parent in that school. So both parents may run. If a child at the school has a mom and a dad and a stepmom and a stepdad, if they all want to run, they're allowed to. So as I said, the parents vote for the members of council. The number of members, as I've said, is decided by your bylaws. After that election, the members of the council vote for executive. So no, you do not run to be chair of the council. You run to be a member of the council. Now, I'm going to get a little pushback on this. For those of you who have done it differently, in September, it's a good time to start to do it the way that the regulations require you to do it. This is not taking away the voice of your parents. In the last webinar of this series, I'm going to talk about effective school councils, and I'm going to talk about committees. This is where any parent can sit and take part in the business of council. This is where actually most of the hard work of council should take place, because this is where you make recommendations, you do the research, you vote on the path that the council should take in your particular area, and then the committee recommendations go forward to council to just votes on it. Let me also state here that the executive has no more powers or ability to make decisions than the regular members. They have a couple more jobs. For example, the executive, we'll talk about the executive in a minute. Some of them have a few more jobs, but they don't have any more power. So I've already talked about this. A parent or guardian enrolled in the school, they may nominate, be nominated by someone or self-nominate in writing. If there is a tie in the election, the final position is chosen by lot. When there are less or equal number of candidates to the number of positions, candidates are acclaimed. So if you've said that you're going to have 10 candidates and only 8 agree to run, they're acclaimed. If you say you're going to have 10 and 10 run, they're acclaimed. If you're going to say you have 10 and 15 parents put their names in, happy days, and you're having an election. If all positions are not filled, they can be appointed. And the chair must be elected within 30 days of the elections. Do it right away. Do it the night of the elections. So let me just explain the acclaimed part again. So you are allowed to have 10 positions, 10 parent members, and you only find 7 who want to do it. So this isn't a bad thing. You've got 7 parents, but the job of the committee, and it could be the election committee, continue their position, continue to work, or you could strike another committee, is to find throughout the year other parent members who might serve on the council. Now, this is a good idea. It's a lot of parents, when they're asked face to face for maybe it's a shortened time. Maybe you're asking them in January to serve, and they've only got to serve 4 months. They might be more willing to do that. Maybe there was a parent who was sort of wanting to do it but didn't. Go up to them in October and say, listen, we didn't get enough. Please consider joining us. Once they come on and they serve, hopefully they'll enjoy their time and they'll run again. So just remember, if you don't get enough positions filled, look at ways to appoint them. Your bylaws must state the course of action you're going to take in appointing a member. So for example, if the election committee suggests someone to be appointed, or a member of council suggests someone to be appointed, then the council has to vote on that, on approaching that person, and vote on them becoming appointed, being appointed to the position. The rules are pretty straightforward for staff representatives. It's anyone who's assigned to the school as a member of staff, and maybe whether they're full or part-time, may be a candidate. And the principal, working with the election committee, may make arrangements for the election of teacher and support staff. So we have 2 representatives from staff. We have the teaching staff, full or part-time, and we have the support staff. That can be EAs, SNAs, CYWs, office administrators, caretakers, anybody who's said to be support staff. And as I said earlier, all appointments, the community representative is appointed by the school council after they are elected. Now, what I'm going to suggest to you for appointing your community representative is wait for a month or so until you've decided what are going to be your main priorities for the year. And then find a community representative that could help you achieve those priorities. So, for example, if in looking at the school improvement plan, you see that literacy is one of the main objectives of the SIP, and the council decides to make that one of your main learning objectives, you might want to get a community representative from your library who could come and sit at meetings and advise you on ways that you could engage families and build the capacity of families to support learning. Student representatives for elementary schools, the principal will consult with the council to determine the need for a student rep, and if one is determined to be so, then the principal will appoint the student. In secondary schools and middle schools, they're usually appointed by the school council. And as we know, elections must take place within the 30 days of the start of school. They may take place during the day or at the first school council meeting. Now, I'm going to talk for a moment about the executive. This is, as I said, the members of council, once they're elected, decide and elect executives or appoint. They can be elected or appointed if only one person runs. The legislation only speaks to the necessity of having a chair, but your bylaws may speak to the necessity of other executive members. So that could be a co-chair and a vice chair, or a vice chair. The difference is that the co-chair shares the duties of the chair. The vice chair supports the chair and does some of the work that the chair might ask them to do or assign them to do, or they work together on what they should do, or steps in when the chair is unavailable. So, for example, if the chair is absent because of illness or a trip, the vice chair would step in and chair the meeting. The Parent and Community Engagement Office highly recommends that no staff members be members of the executive. You may also decide to elect or appoint, as I've said, a chair or vice chair, a treasurer, and a secretary. It's a good idea to have those two positions, treasurer and secretary. They are very important positions. They carry a lot of responsibilities, and they're necessary for the effective functioning of your council. You could have in your bylaws that the position could be shared by two people if you wanted, especially for a job like secretary. If someone knew that they only had to take the minutes of every other meeting, they might be more willing to take the job. And now I'm going to talk about funding. Where does your money come from? There are two types of funding for school councils, public and private. Let's look at public funds first. I'm always surprised how many school councils are still unaware of this money that's sitting waiting for them. The TDSB provides every school council in the board $1.25 per student to a minimum of $300 and a maximum of $1,000 to be used for the operation of the school council. This means to pay for if you're still running off agendas and minutes, to pay for that. If the school asks you to pay for it, to pay for any food or refreshments you might supply for the meeting, to pay for translation or interpretation services, to pay for child minding. If you write nothing else down from this webinar, write this down. This money comes in on the school's budget line, and it's on general ledger line 41500, GL 41500. Many principals are unaware that the money is there. And so when council chairs go to them and say, "Oh, I heard there was some money for us," the principal will say, "No, there isn't." Well, now you can say, "Yes, there is," and it's on GL 41500. Because the money comes in on the principal's budget line, he or she is responsible for that money, as they are for the rest of the money in their budget. So they're going to be very careful of how the money is spent. Work closely with your principal or your office administrator in keeping track of that money, and if giving receipts for reimbursement. So you will have, for this money, you will have to spend the money first, hand in the receipts, and be reimbursed by the office administrator. But you must report how you spent the money in your PSAB and financial reports at the end of the year. Also on GL 41500 is $500 from the Ministry of Education. This money is designated for outreach to the parent community. That doesn't mean putting in bike racks or something else that the principal wants to do. That's for the school council to reach out to their parent community. Let's keep our eye on the ball. We're reaching out to the parent community to build their capacity to support pupil achievement. What can you do? Are you going to use the money to run a newsletter that informs parents gives them hints on how they can support learning? Are you going to hold workshops that helps them learn how to support learning at home? You could use it if you wanted for a night that builds relationships, because relationships are key to family engagement. But try to work in something about learning as well. And of course, also from the Ministry of Education are programs which come to a maximum of $1,000. And now the private funds. Private funds for school councils are raised from fundraising activities of the council. You should locate the money in your bank, in a bank account set up for the school council, not in the school's bank account, in your bank account. The TDSB offers online banking through PACE, or you may open something at your local bank. If you're still old like me and you're doing checks, make sure you have 2 or 3 signing authorities on the checks. But it's also good in however you're going to access and pay money to have 2 people that are responsible for it, just so that you are accountable. You have to submit the annual report, as I've said a few times, the PSAB to the TDSB of what money came in and what money went out. Remember, it's council money and it's council accountability. This brings me to an important part of school councils: planning and budgeting. Before the TDSB requires that school councils fundraise with particular objectives in mind. They really discourage you from fundraising just for the sake of fundraising. They want you to say what it is you want and why you want it, and then go out and fundraise for particular projects. And I'm going to urge you now to begin to think, keep the little guy with the eye on the ball is on this page for a reason. Your fundraising must be aimed at pupil achievement through family engagement, right? Not pupil achievement through the classroom. That's taken care of in other legislation. Your job isn't to provide gifts for the school. Your job is to find ways to build the capacity of your parents to engage in their kids' learning, to be able to support their pupil achievement. So, to that end, you need to survey parents for what they need. What do you need to support your child in math this year? What are you feeling uneasy about? Do you understand? Do you understand what's happening in the literacy part of the curriculum? This means different surveys for different levels of your school. And learning from the teachers what's going to be happening this year, and transferring that into what do the parents need to know to support that learning. It also means surveying the parents, the staff. When I've written here staff needs, what I mean is not what do they need in the classroom, but what do they feel they need from their parent community in the way of support for learning. What do they think would help them if their parents understood that and help the students? As I said, you have to have a stated use for the funds. You cannot carry funds over unless there's a long-term goal. And I suggest that you have a budget committee, which brings me to this little diagram of planning and budgeting. It starts with the school council. The school council determines their financial needs, and those financial needs are based on the surveying you did of your families for what they need and want, and then the plans that the council makes coming out of the information they got on those surveys. Research tells us that when what is offered to our families is meaningful and relevant to them, they will engage. And what is meaningful and relevant to every single one of our parents is pupil achievement. So once the school council determines its financial needs, it goes to the budget committee. And by the way, the budget committee is the only committee that should be chaired by a member of the council, and that member would be the treasurer. The budget committee allocates money based on council directives. It advises the council of shortfalls in funds, and it ensures that there's no long-term carryover of money. So when the council says to the budget committee, we are going to provide a series of workshops to build our families' capacities to support learning, and we think we're going to need about $1,000 this year. They send that to budget. Well, budget can't hold over money for more than 2 years. So they look at what's in their bank account and they say, we've only got $200. We have to raise $800 for the council's activities. And here comes fundraising. Fundraising, as I said, can't raise money without a purpose. They must be accountable, and they must consider the community and the ability of the community to raise funds. Fundraising says, here's from budget, you need $800. All right, let's think about that. And thinking about their community and being accountable to them, they come up with a couple of ideas of how that $800 could be raised. It goes back to school council and perhaps a budget, and they say, we think this would be a good idea. School council has the final vote on any recommendations that come from budget or fundraising. They are responsible for the money, and they are responsible for the distribution of the money. And budget committee is responsible for keeping the records so that the treasurer may report to the school council how the funding was raised and spent. So again, just to recap, school council decides on the needs. Budget decides on the amount of money that needs to be raised. Fundraising makes recommendations on what activities could be used to raise that money. And school council has the final vote on all decisions. This makes your work more accountable to your parent community and more inclusive. Which brings me to the last thought for today. School councils must build partnerships by being transparent, inclusive, and accountable. Our school community, our parents, our, our families, our educators, and our wider community must know that what our council is do must know what our council is doing, that anyone who wants to be involved may be, and that they are accountable for all of the decisions that they make. I'm just going to tell you this, and then I will come back online to answer any questions that might be there. The next webinar will look at bylaws. It will take place on Tuesday, March 26th at 7 p.m. The link is available at the Parent Community Engagement Office page of the TDSB website. And this webinar will be available on the PCEO page sometime in the very near future. So give me 1 second and I'll come back to you. There I am. I hope you're there. If you have any questions, please take a moment and type it in the group chat, which you should see at the side of your page. If not, hover over the left-hand side of the page. At the very top, you'll see a blue box with white lines in it that say chat. So I'll wait a moment and see if there's any questions. Again, if you have any questions for me, please feel free to write me at withequalstep@gmail.com. As well, I'm going to be at the Parents as Partners conference in the morning doing a workshop, and you're welcome to hunt me down and ask me any questions there as well. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in. I apologize if you don't see the chat box at the side. When I was trying this out, it said something about having to sign in with a Gmail account, which is new. I haven't seen that when I've used this format before. So I suspect YouTube is changing their practices. Please, please write me if you have any questions. Good luck with your school council. And remember that we are here for pupil achievement, and family engagement to be the most effective occurs in the home, with families engaging in a variety of ways with their children's learning. And it's our job as councils to build our parents' capacity to be able to do that and to support them and our pupils any way we can. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope that the information was helpful and clear, and I look forward to seeing you next time when we're going to look at bylaws in all of their amazing formats. So thank you and good night.